Netherlands. Since the Second World War, there's been an increase, a great increase, in immigration from what's framed in Dutch policy as non-Western countries. And at first, this was from former colonies who were considered repatriates or internal migrants, for example, Surinamese. And then in the 1960s and 70s, this was increasingly migration from people labeled as temporary workers, as guest workers. And these were people predominantly from rural Turkey and Morocco, and then later their families. And it's these guest workers and their descendants, who are commonly called non-Western immigrants, that drive current concerns over immigrant integration. And these non-Western immigrants and their descendants are popularly and in policy seen as culturally, linguistically, religiously, and racially different than mainstream Dutch. They're seen as lacking Dutch language skills, and because of that, they have disproportionately lower rates of educational achievement, higher rates of criminality and unemployment, and social isolation than mainstream Dutch. So part of this problem, our social problem seen in the Netherlands today, is the result of not having a formal immigrant integration or civic integration program until 1998. So in 1988, the Inburgering program was established, and it focused on newcomers, adult newcomers, undertaking 500 hours of Dutch language training and an additional 100 hours of social training. It targets specifically non-Western immigrants because Western immigrants tend to be from the EU and they don't need to go through these training courses. And it is also passing a series of tests. Heavily language it makes newcomers eligible for Dutch citizenship. And through these policies, the Dutch language has since become the key technology of immigrant integration and citizenship education. So I did my research primarily with language coaching projects, volunteer language coaching projects in Amsterdam between 2009 and 2011. This Inburgering policy intervention formalized the language requirement for citizenship acquisition. However, by the time that this policy was implemented, it was clear that there was already a serious service gap in terms of adult Dutch language courses. In 1999, a year after the Inburgering legislation was adopted, volunteer initiatives sprung up first in Amsterdam and then later across the Netherlands to provide Dutch language conversation partnerships. As the director of one program, People in Amsterdam, commented, this gap was recognized even before the policy legislation, and these volunteer projects were organized in part to help make the city and the neighborhoods better places to live for everyone, so for newcomers and for native Dutch. At the time of my research, between 2009 and 2011, they were grown from just one language coaching program in 1999 to 5 major language coaching programs in Amsterdam alone, and then hundreds more across the country, often based on the original Cultural Amsterdam guidelines. So I conducted 13 months of ethnographic fieldwork in Amsterdam between 2009 and 10, and again for a month in 2011, which primarily consisted of semi-structured interviews with key informants who I flag as the Dutch language coaching volunteers and their coordinators at these coaching projects, who are predominantly native Dutch, well-educated, so with college or university education, although they are a range of ages and occupations, from students to retirees. Conducted in English and Dutch. I also conducted an observation over the course of 1 year in language coaching programs where I was myself a language coaching student learning Dutch, and at public, local, and national events across, mainly in Amsterdam. So I situate these questions in understanding about citizenship, which I view as a legal relationship with the nation state, as well as a moral and cultural relationship with members of society, so people that you interact with on a daily basis in your neighborhood, at the city, but also at the level of the nation state, and it's a moral and cultural relationship with the state. So it's also a site where culturalized behaviors, norms and values drop anchor in national identity discourse, and this includes historically and colonially cultivated notions of difference, such as race, religion, gender, sexuality, language, but importantly, these culturalized behaviors have also come to include neoliberal modes of participation in Dutch society, and those are now considered Dutch cultural norms. So this includes things like I just want to talk about paid work, following an educational course, active parenting, being involved in childhood education, as well as volunteerism as all good forms forms of participation in Dutch society. So, accessing neoliberal and now Dutch modes of citizenship participation is now widely thought to hinge on being able to communicate. So for non-Western immigrants, this means speaking Dutch. As Casper, one of the language coaches I spoke with, said, and many other informants echoed this, if you can't speak the language, well, you also can't pursue a good education at school, you can't get into a good training program, and then you can't find a good job. Really, language is the basis of everything. So, popular discourse draws on neoliberal skills which are rooted in language as a key to integration, but it also draws on essentialist notions of difference. So, non-Western immigrants' perceived failure to integrate is often framed as being due to their cultural backwardness, their cultural distance, and even incommensurability from mainstream Dutch. So it draws on these kind of historical notions about different kinds of differences. So two key findings I want to present. The first one is how language coaches re-articulate morality and culture in Dutch citizenship practice to create a more inclusive sense of what citizenship is, what being Dutch is. So they downplay and dismiss the connections between belonging in the Netherlands and essentialist cultural traits by instead emphasizing the kind of newer neoliberal traits as Dutch cultural traits. And as keys to good social participation and good citizenship practice. So integration for Dutch language coaches is not a cultural problem, but a social problem. For them, citizens are still supposed to be independent, responsible, and self-sufficient, but they see that the failure of these immigrants to integrate is not only on these individuals themselves for not seeking out resources, but also on the government's lack of policy and social services for immigrants. So it's not their culture, it's due to their language deficiency. So volunteer Dutch language coaches not only teach the essential Dutch language skills to newcomers, but through other kinds of interactions that they have with newcomers, they're also acting as informal citizenship educators, helping newcomers to learn the way. So through everyday discussions about Dutch etiquette, social behavior and expectations, as well as how to access different resources in their community, they're creating bridges between native Dutch and newcomers, not only between partners, but also within their neighborhood and other social spheres. And because of this, they're helping newcomers integrate in a more meaningful way on the ground than these mandatory civic integration courses from the state. So this has important implications for how we can really come to understand belonging in the Netherlands and value citizenship as an everyday ethic. So in conclusion, since the launch of mandatory civic integration policy, there has been funding available to those required to undertake the courses and exams. However, this funding has been steadily eroded, and since the beginning of this year, there's no longer any funding for students that adult students who need to undertake these courses. Newcomers must now shoulder the costs, not only of the courses, but of the tests, which ranges into hundreds of euros, up to about 1,000 euros. These changes were anticipated when I was doing my fieldwork even to create even greater demand for the free volunteer-based language coaching projects at the heart of my research. So it was interesting to see how these funding changes affect the landscape of immigrant integration in the Netherlands in the coming years. And as many of you know, as we discussed, Canadian policies around immigration and citizenship have changed dramatically in recent years. And one of these changes, which I'm interested in, is the shift to more formalization of official language requirements for a number of different immigration streams. So coupled with a decrease in funding for settlement services in Canada, especially in Ontario, I think that my research can offer some interesting insights that help further explore the future. Thank you.